Hello coaster lovers. So when you think of big name manufacturers, you think of B&M, RMC, Intamin, and GCI. But in this video, there's a company that also can be brought up as a big name manufacturer, and that manufacturer is Mack Rides. This company began in 1780 by constructing horse carriages for transportation, and now they've created nearly 200 roller coasters, and there's said to be more in the future. They have some successful models such as the Powered Coaster, the Wild Mouse, and especially with the Mack Extreme Spinner, even though there are two at the time that this video is published. But one of their prime models is the multi-launch coaster. They have 18 different multi-launch coasters, but it's really 10. You'll find out why in a bit. And this is all of them ranked. So before we start, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe and bash the bell for future upcoming videos. So let's start off the list with the lone coaster that I've experienced, Slinky Dog Dash at Disney's Hollywood Studios. This is by far the tamest coaster on this list, but I had a fun experience on Slinky Dog Dash. I was expecting it to be okay. It'll be like a get the credit coaster, but after I rode it in the front, I was pleasantly surprised by how fun it was. The two launches weren't the most forceful launches ever, but they weren't that forceless, like some other coasters that will be featured later in the video. But anyway, I like all the theming that you whiz around, especially with the ghost signs on the second launch, and the layout between the first and second launch has some decent forces there. I like the restraints too, they were pretty comfortable. I had a fun time at Slinky Dog Dash, but don't ride it if it has an insane line. I had to wait an hour for it, and it was kind of worth it, but I would wait shorter. The closest comparison to Slinky Dog Dash, in my opinion, is Manta at SeaWorld San Diego, which is taking the number 9 spot. This is a step up from Slinky Dog Dash, and it looks very familiar. Just switch the theming to a Manta theme and give some overbank turns, and that is Manta. It is a darn good family coaster. With all these coasters, the banking and transitions are so fluid. I also like the placement. At one point, it dives under a pathway that can make for some killer photo ops. I love the entry as well. You can just see the rock work while holding up the copy and paste Manta logo. This park needed this coaster because pre-2012, the only coaster they had was Journey to Atlantis, and that was barely a roller coaster, just a water ride with some coaster aspects to it. But Manta has upped the family coaster game, and there's even a flamingo exhibit right next door, and that makes the ride experience better. At the number 8 spot, this coaster looks pretty overrated in my opinion, and this is why I count the total coasters as 10 instead of 18. It is the Blue Fire Clones. For this, I'm grouping all 8 Blue Fire clones, and this is the most iconic coaster on the list, because if you're a GP before, you've definitely seen this coaster before in a clickbait video or thumbnail. But anyways, this ride looks good, but not great. The launch looks okay, and I heard it doesn't run the best. The highlight for most of the majority that has ridden this coaster is easily the final inversion. You just get whipped through it, and that should bring some good force. A ride that also pulls good forces is another multi-launch coaster in Germany. It is Star Trek Operation Enterprise. This is at Movie Park Germany, and it's the only Star Trek themed roller coaster in the world, and I'd easily take this over Blue Fire. You have some great theming in the queue and in the station, but the ride itself is decent. The first launch is probably the weakest launch I've ever seen. You barely get any speed, but the second and third launches are better. The second launch leads you to a twisted spike, and if you're right in the back, you get some amazing airtime and laterals. Then the rest of the layout has good airtime and hang time moments, especially with the double inverting element that I don't know what it's called. I probably sound like a GP. But anyway, this ride looks pretty solid. Staying in Europe, the next coaster is definitely the best ride at this park, and it's Blackpool Pleasure Beach with Icon. This ride looks pretty good. Of course, with most of these coasters, the launch does not do a lot. I said it once and I'll say it again. Mack is notorious for making weak launches, and Icon is no different. But don't worry, the second launch is better. The top hat gives an amazing head chopper with big one supports. Pretty much after the Helix is S-bends and a great inline twist. Then the Star Trek-esque Immelman gives pretty good airtime, and everything else gets really close to Big Dipper. There's also a special back car experience called Enzo, and that just adds to the experience, but it doesn't really spin that much. And speaking of a special back car experience, there's a ride down under called Steel Typan that has one too. This is at Dream World in the Gold Coast of Australia, and this is basically the same as the Blue Fire clones, but this one is different from all the rest because it has a twisted spike. It kind of gives me vibes of Wicked Twister's back spike, and like I said about Icon, it also has a spinning seat in the back called Tail Whip, and when you're in the back there experiencing that spike, it's going to feel majestic, but everything else is basically applied to the Blue Fire section of the video. So let's move on to the number 4 spot, which was the coaster that was supposed to ride last year, but sadly it did not happen because of the move. I'm talking about Copperhead Strike. This is at Carowinds, and it has a great layout. You start off with a JoJo roll, which is pretty rare. The only other coasters that I can think of that have a JoJo roll are Hydra and Ride of Happiness. You also have 2 tremendously filled hang time vertical loops, along with the corkscrew. The 2 launches are okay, but the cutback after the second launch, by the way, the airtime in the middle of the launch gives some good airtime. But anyway, the cutback has great hang time as well. A ride that looks like Copperhead Strike is down in Abu Dhabi at Motion Gate called Capital Bullet Train. This is the only Hunger Games themed roller coaster in the world, and this is basically Copperhead Strike but with a swing launch and a spike. But that first launch is quite dull, basically it just glides on straight track, but the second launch and third launches are superior. The spike should give a great floating sensation, nothing too crazy but it'll be something. Everything else is Copperhead-esque with the vertical loop and 0G roll, so we are going to boost up the stats a bit with our number 2 spot with Helix. This is at Liseberg in the heart of Gothenburg in Sweden, and this ride looks fantastic. Just like the other coasters on this list, the launches do absolutely nothing, just gliding on straight track, just like Capital Bullet Train. But don't worry, the layout is very terrain based and it has 7 wonderful inversions, especially the inside top hat, which is very Mr. Freeze-esque after the second launch, and with the Norwegian loop too. If you don't know what that is, it's a dive loop connected to an Immelman. If you've ridden Fahrenheit at Hershey Park, or even a more obscure coaster, Speed Monster at Tusenfried, it's the same inversion. This ride looks incredible, but a tad bit overrated, but it doesn't even come close to the one and only Beyond the Cloud. This is at Suzhou Amusement Land Forest Park in China. That park name is such a mouthful, but this is the most obscure coaster on this list, and this ride just looks incredible. Not the best coaster by Mack, but it's up there. This is basically a Franken coaster. It has a forceful launch like an Intamin, and speaking of Intamin, it follows with an Intamin Accelerator-esque top hat. If you've ridden Stealth, Choplo Dragster, King Cot, or Accelerator, it's very similar. That is followed by a fast 0G roll that is Max Force-esque. Then after that is an Icon-esque Immelman. Then after that is an incredible speed hill like Copperhead. The Cobra Roll doesn't do a lot, just a bigger version of Hydra's Cobra Loop. After that is a huge vertical loop that is like Flash at Lua Adventures Loop. This ride looks smooth, forceful, and it should be a great time. So I want to hear from you guys, how would you rank the Mack multi-launches? If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a big thumbs up, and if you like my content, consider subscribing to the channel. I have more upcoming videos in the future, and if you want to be notified, smash the bell. And like always, make sure to keep that adrenaline pumping, and thanks for watching.